Let me start this video by saying Metallica is one of my favorite bands. It was really hard to rank these albums because my opinion changes over time. I had a different list a couple years ago. I could have another list in the future, but this list is accurate as of 2022, September 2022. It could change next month or tomorrow, but I'm gonna stick with this list for today. I'm only gonna cover the 10 main studio albums. I'm not gonna cover albums like S&M, Garage Inc., or Lulu. You wouldn't want me to cover Lulu anyways because we all know what to think about it. No offense to Metallica or Lou Reid, but I think we all agree it's not one of their best. I'm ranking these albums worst to best, but I don't think the worst albums are that bad. I just prefer certain albums over the other albums. I'm sure my ranking doesn't line up with other people's rankings because you have the older fans and you have the newer fans, and we kind of all have different opinions. But if you could please leave a comment on your ranking, then we could have a civil conversation about what everyone likes. I know there's going to be some disagreements with what I say, but we can always have a talk about it in the comments. I encourage you to not skip throughout this video because I'm also going to list some of my favorite songs from each album. So if you've never heard some of these albums, I can at least point you in the direction of what I like. Maybe you would like it too. But I think I've rambled enough, so let's get started. So my number 10 pick may be surprising to some, but it's actually Hardwired to Self-Destruct. I know a lot of people like this album, and it's not terrible by any means, but it's worse to me because I feel like a lot of the songs sound like older Metallica songs, and nothing really sticks out to me, so that's why I have it at the worst. My favorite song from the album is probably Dream No More, just because I like the groove of that song and everything. This album's kind of forgettable to me, to be honest. But I don't want to hate on this album, so I'm just going to continue on this list. My next pick is Saint Anger, which a lot of people don't like this album, and many people would put this at their number 10. But I actually like a few of the songs on here, and I really enjoy the movie Some Kind of Monster. I actually brought that documentary up on one of my previous videos, which I'll link in the description for you to watch. I like quite a few songs on Saint Anger, even if the snare's bad, or if some people think it sounds like new metal. And I think the standout track's actually the first one, Frantic. I never heard that song actually until I played Guitar Hero Metallica, but I do really enjoy that song and I do come back to listen to it, and it's on my Spotify playlist and all that. My next pick is probably going to get a lot of hate from the older fans, but this is my video and my opinion, so I'm going to list it here. That album is Kill 'Em All. I do think this album is one of their most important, and it introduced a lot of people to thrash metal, but for me, the production and just some of the songwriting is weak on it. I do love Seek and Destroy, which is my song pick for this album, but most of the other stuff falls flat to me. I would probably feel different about this album if I grew up with this album, but I didn't listen to this album until much later in my Metallica journey. I do like Pulling Teeth, which is the bass solo from Cliff Burton. I think that part's really cool, but I'm just putting it low on this list because I think the songs could be better. And I thought these songs were great when I seen Metallica play the album in its entirety at the Orion Festival in 2013, but this album just doesn't do it for me. My next pick is the album Load, which I considered putting Load and Reload together, but they are two separate albums. I do think these albums would be better if they would have cut like half the songs from each and just made it one really good album. That's not how it happened, so we're kind of stuck with what it is. Load was a pretty controversial album when it came out because they got their haircuts and stuff around this era, and they went for more of a traditional hard rock route instead of playing metal, so a lot of people were not really happy with this album, but there's a few standout tracks, which the one I'm picking for this video is Bleeding Me. I just like the vibe of that song. I also like King Nothing. I think the production and songs on this are pretty solid, but only about half the album's good to me, so that's why it's so low on the list. My next pick is Death Magnetic, which this was my first like new Metallica album I ever remember releasing. I remember when it released and being excited for it. I used to listen to The Day That Never Comes over and over again, and Guitar Hero Metallica also came out around this time, which got me really interested in the band. I mentioned that I listened to The Day That Never Comes a lot. I think that's the best song of the album, and that's the one I recommend. I also really enjoy Cyanide just because it's pretty catchy and grooving. Overall, it's a pretty solid album, but it kind of suffers from the same thing that Load does, where about half of the songs are good and then the other half are just so-so. My next pick is Reload. It's pretty equal with Death Magnetic and Load, kinda. I kind of put them all together, where I think half the songs are good, half are kind of mediocre. I think there's a few more songs I like on Reload more than Load. My favorite song is The Memory Remains, but I also love Fuel and The Unforgiven 2, which all those songs happen to be the singles off this album, but I still really enjoy them, and I think they're the most solid songs off the album. The next four albums were really hard to rank, and these albums really changed in the rotation for me all the time. This is how I feel about the albums at the time of this recording. The worst one I think is Ride the Lightning, which this album's not bad by any means, it's just how I feel at the time of this recording. I really think this is a classic Metallica album, but it's not as strong as maybe the next three, but it's still really good. My favorite song's probably For Whom the Bell Tolls, but it may actually be The Call of Cthulhu, Cthulhu, correct me in the comments. You can really hear the influence that Dave Mustaine had on the song. The chord progression at the starting is basically the chord progression at the starting of Hangar 18, but in a more ballady format. I really love this album, and I really think you should check it out. My next pick is Master of Puppets. This album is really, really good, and it probably has most of the classic songs that we all know and that they play a lot at their concerts. There's really not much to say about this that hasn't been said already. One cool fact that I did learn a few years ago that I thought was cool is that Geddy Lee from Rush almost produced this album, which I think that's pretty cool because Rush is one of my favorite bands as well. So it would have been interesting to hear that different take, but we'll never know how that would have sounded. It's cool to imagine it, you know? It's really hard to pick any standout tracks on this because the album's solid all the way through. Today I'm gonna pick Welcome Home Sanitarium just because that's one of the ones I really fell in love with first. I remember learning it on guitar and learning that intro solo and everything and really being excited when I got it down. But you also have songs like Master of Puppets, Battery, The Thing That Should Not Be, Orion. It's really solid all the way through. The next album I pick is Injustice for All. The reason this is so high on the list for me is because this is the first Metallica album I ever remember listening to. My dad had that VHS tape of the One music video with Lars Ulrich talking and stuff, and I just fell in love with the band after hearing this album. I heard One for the first time and I was sold on this band. That's my standout track for this album. I'm not going to say much more about the album, just go check it out. So my number one pick is the Black Album. I know some fans don't like this album because it got rid of a lot of their thrash roots, but it really does have a lot of good songs on it, even if they are rock instead of metal. A good song's a good song, so I don't know why people complain about it. I really don't know how to pick a best track off of this. I don't really listen to Enter Sandman much just because it's been overplayed so many times, so I'd probably go with something like The Unforgiven. So there's my ranking. I would love to know your ranking in the comments, and I also recommend watching that documentary video I was talking about earlier because I talk about Some Kind of Monster for a little bit, and you could find out about some documentaries that you never knew about. Thanks for watching, guys, and have a great day.